The emergency sirens had been screaming for 3 days straight, and Nisara could barely remember what silence sounded like anymore. She pressed her crystalline fingers against the viewing screen, watching another section of the orbital defense grid collapse into fragments. The Ravagers were methodical in their destruction, breaking apart each satellite with precise efficiency before moving to the next. In 2 more hours, the homeworld would be completely exposed. Council leader, the Western Continent shelters are at capacity, her aide reported, his voice trembling. We still have 40 million people waiting to evacuate. Nisara closed her eyes. 40 million. The number felt abstract, too large to comprehend as individual lives. The Turthan people had existed for 12,000 years without knowing war. Their weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. Their ships were built for exploration, not combat. When the Ravagers arrived 5 weeks ago, the entire species learned a terrible lesson. The universe did not care about their peaceful intentions. The first wave had consumed the mining colonies on the outer moons. The Turthan defense fleet engaged them with stunning weapons and containment fields. The Ravagers absorbed the energy and grew stronger. By the time the military commanders realized their mistake and switched to kinetic weapons, half the fleet was already torn apart by the swarm's bioships. The creatures seemed to think as one mind, adapting to every tactic within hours. Show me the latest projections, Nisara ordered. The holographic display shifted, showing red spreading across the map like a disease. The Ravagers would breach the atmosphere in 18 hours. After that, the underground shelters would buy maybe a week before the creatures found ways inside. Then it would be over. 12,000 years of history, art, philosophy, and science would become nothing but organic matter for the swarm to process and consume. There must be something we can do, her aide said. Though everyone in the command center knew there was not. Nisara had already tried everything. She sent messages to every allied species in their sector. Most responded with sympathy and apologies. None sent ships. The Turthan system was too far into the frontier, they said. The Ravagers were too dangerous. Military resources were stretched thin. But Nisara knew the truth in their carefully worded responses. The other species were afraid. If they engaged the Ravagers here, the swarm might follow them home. So the Turthan would die alone. There is one option. The communications officer spoke up from her station. She was young, barely into her 2nd century. The forbidden protocols. Everyone in the command center turned to look at her. The forbidden protocols, the regulations that every species in the galactic community agreed to follow without question. Chief among them was the ban on unencrypted distress signals. Broadcasting openly into space was considered worse than reckless. It was suicidal. Out in the dark between stars, things existed that were better left unfound. Predator species that hunted by following signals. Ancient automated weapons that could not distinguish between targets. And then there were the quarantine worlds. Absolutely not, one of the military advisors said immediately. We could attract something worse than the Ravagers. Worse than extinction. The communications officer challenged. What exactly do we have to lose? Nisara felt the weight of command pressing down on her like physical force. She was not a warrior or a strategist. Before the crisis, she had been a teacher of philosophy. Elected to the council because of her careful reasoning and ethical clarity. Now she had to make a choice that violated everything the galactic community stood for. But those same communities had abandoned her people to die. Do it, Nisara said quietly. Send the signal on all frequencies, unencrypted. Include our location, our situation, and a plea for help to anyone who can hear us. The communications officer nodded and turned to her console. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. The quantum relay network will carry it across 300 systems. If anyone is listening, they'll hear us. And if the wrong thing hears us, the military advisor demanded. Nisara looked at him directly. Then at least we tried. I will not let our people die wondering if there was one more option we were too afraid to take. The signal transmitted. It was a simple message, stripped of all the formal protocols that usually governed interspecies communication. It said only that the Turthan people were under attack, that they were dying, and that they desperately needed help. The message included coordinates and tactical data about the Ravagers. Then it repeated, broadcasting continuously into the void. Hours passed. The Ravagers continued their systematic destruction of the orbital defenses. More sections of the planet evacuated into shelters. The government began the grim task of deciding who would get the remaining spaces when they ran out. Nisara refused to leave the command center. She watched the communication logs, hoping for any response. Most of the signals that came back were automated warnings. Several nearby species detected the broadcast and sent angry messages about protocol violations. One particularly hostile response threatened sanctions if the Turthan survived. Nisara deleted it without reading the whole thing. Then, 36 hours after the initial broadcast, something different appeared in the log. The transmission had bounced through the quantum relay network, traveling farther than they expected. It reached a monitoring station in a system the Turthan had never visited. A place the galactic maps marked with warning symbols and quarantine designations. The response was brief. Message received. Assessment underway. Stand by. It came from somewhere called Outpost Ganymede, orbiting a gas giant in a system the galactic community knew by a simple designation, Deathworld 3. But the inhabitants called it something else. They called it Sol. They called the third planet Earth. And 12 days later, Nisara would learn exactly why the galaxy feared that distant world and the species that evolved in its brutal gravity. Toxic atmosphere and radiation-soaked environment. She would learn what it meant when humans said they were coming to help. But first, the Turthan would have to survive long enough for the Deathworlders to arrive. Lieutenant Rodriguez had been staring at the same data stream for 6 hours when she finally understood what she was looking at. The night shift on Ganymede was usually quiet, monitoring background radiation and logging automated reports from deep space probes. Nothing exciting ever happened out here in the orbit of Jupiter, which was exactly why she had requested the assignment after her tour on Mars, but the signal that appeared on her screen was different from anything. In the training manuals, it was raw, unfiltered, desperate. Replayed the translation algorithm 3 times to make sure the computer had not made an error. An alien species was calling for help. They were under attack by something called the Ravager Swarm. Their defenses had failed. Their population was dying. The message included coordinates that put them almost 80 light-years away, far beyond any human exploration. It also included tactical data that made Rodriguez feel sick. The casualty numbers were climbing in real time as the message repeated. "I need to wake up Commander Park," she muttered to herself, already reaching for the emergency communication channel. Within 20 minutes, every senior officer on Ganymede was crowded into the communication center, watching the alien distress call play again and again. Commander Park made the decision quickly. This went above her authority. She forwarded everything directly to Earth, flagged as Priority Alpha. Then they waited. The response came faster than Rodriguez expected. 40 minutes later, video feeds from the United Earth Space Command appeared on every screen. Admiral Okoye herself was reviewing the transmission, surrounded by military intelligence analysts and xenobiology experts. Rodriguez felt a strange mixture of excitement and dread. First contact was not supposed to happen like this. It was supposed to be carefully planned with diplomatic teams and cultural experts and years of preparation. "Authenticate the source," Admiral Okoye ordered, her voice carrying the accent of her Lagos childhood, mixed with decades of military command. The analyst worked quickly. "Signal originated from a quantum relay network, ma'am. Technology is more advanced than ours but follows similar principles. The energy signature is consistent across multiple relay points. This is genuine. Time to reach their location? 3 weeks if we use the experimental jump drives. 5 months with conventional propulsion." Admiral Okoye leaned back in her chair, studying the tactical data with the expression of someone who had seen too many battles. "Analysis of this Ravager threat?" A younger officer pulled up holographic projections. "Biomechanical hybrid species. Hive mind intelligence. They consume resources at incredible rates and adapt to resistance. Based on their attack patterns, they'll completely overwhelm the Turthan homeworld in less than 2 weeks. Recommendations?" The room fell silent. Rodriguez watched from Ganymede as the Earth commanders exchanged glances. Finally, one of them spoke. "This is not our fight, Admiral. We barely have resources to defend our own system. The Turthan are 80 light-years away. We've never even met them before today. So we do nothing?" Okoye asked, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "We send condolences. We offer to preserve their cultural data if they can transmit it. We do what we can without risking human lives for aliens we don't know." Another officer disagreed immediately. "That's exactly the wrong call. This is our chance to announce ourselves to the galaxy. These quantum relays connect to hundreds of systems. Every species with access is watching to see who responds. If we show up with a fleet and save the Turthan, we establish Earth as a power player immediately. We could also get our people killed, the first officer countered. We know nothing about this enemy. We could jump into a situation we can't handle. The debate continued for 30 minutes. Rodriguez listened to every argument, feeling helpless across the vast distance between Jupiter and Earth. She thought about the alien message, the desperation in how it was formatted, the way the casualty numbers kept climbing. Someone had sent that message knowing it might be their last act. Someone had chosen hope over protocol. Admiral Okoye finally raised her hand and the room fell silent. "I'm going to tell you a story," she said quietly. 60 years ago, when I was a child in Lagos, the climate collapse wars were at their worst. Our city was drowning. The seawalls had failed. We sent distress calls to every nation that had ships and aircraft. Do you know how many responded? No one answered. None, Okoye said. Not one. We were too far away, too expensive to save, too much risk for not enough reward. 3 million people lived in Lagos when the waters rose. 50,000 survived. I watched my entire family drown while we waited for help that never came. The room remained quiet. The Turthan sent that message to 300 systems. Okoye continued. Do you know how many have responded so far? She pulled up the relay data. 0. Not one species is coming to help them. They're going to die alone because everyone else decided they're not worth the risk. She stood up, her posture straight despite her 68 years. We are going. I'm authorizing Task Force Valkyrie. 12 ships. Full military deployment. We leave in 72 hours. Admiral, the Council will need to approve, then wake them up and get approval. But we're going. Earth survived because we learned to fight for every inch of ground, every breath of air, every drop of water. We became the hardest species in our system because we had no choice. The galaxy might not know us yet, but they're about to learn what humans do when someone calls for help. Rodriguez felt something electric run through her as she watched from Ganymede. This was history happening in real time. The next 72 hours were chaos. Earth's orbital shipyards went into emergency production mode. 3 dreadnoughts were pulled from patrol routes, the Indomitable, the Relentless, and the Unconquered. 5 destroyers were added for tactical flexibility. 4 support carriers would handle fighters and marines. The ships were designed for operating in the harsh environments of Sol system, built to withstand radiation that would cook most alien species and atmospheric pressures that would crush their bodies. Captain Wei received her orders while overseeing repairs on the Indomitable. After a routine patrol near Venus, she read them twice to make sure she understood correctly. Deploy to unknown space. Engage hostile alien force. Protect civilian population. Standard rules of engagement applied, which meant her crew was authorized to use whatever force necessary to complete the mission. She called her senior staff together. We're making first contact, she told them simply. And we're doing it by flying into a war zone. Her tactical officer looked at the data. These Ravagers have already destroyed most of the Turthan fleet. What makes Command think we can do better? We smiled without humor. Because we're from Earth. We've been fighting gravity, weather, radiation, and each other since before we had written language. War is what we're good at. The fleet assembled near Mars, running final checks and loading ammunition. Marines practiced boarding actions. Fighter pilots ran combat simulations. Engineers triple-checked every system. The experimental jump drives had only been tested twice before, both times with unmanned probes. Now they would carry 12 warships and 4,000 personnel across 80 light-years in a single leap. Admiral Okoye broadcast a message to the entire task force the night before departure. Tomorrow we jump into unknown space to fight an enemy we've never seen, to protect people we've never met. Some of you are asking why. The answer is simple. Because they asked. Because no one else will. Because if we don't go, an entire civilization dies wondering why the universe was silent when they screamed for help. We go because it's the right thing to do. We go because we're human and humans help. The fleet jumped on schedule. Reality twisted around them as the experimental drives tore holes in space itself. For 3 weeks, Task Force Valkyrie would travel through dimensions that human minds could barely comprehend, racing toward a star system where millions were dying. And in her command center on the Turthan homeworld, Nisara watched the Ravagers close in, not knowing that help was already on the way, not knowing that Earth had answered, Space tore open at the edge of the Turthan system like a wound in reality itself. 12 ships emerged from the impossible angles of jump space, their hulls still glowing with the energy of transition. The vessels were brutal in their design, all sharp angles and armored plating, covered in weapons that served no purpose except to destroy. They moved with coordinated precision, spreading into a defensive formation as their sensors swept the system. Nisara was sleeping in her command center chair when the alarms started. She had not left the room in 9 days. The shelters were full. The Ravagers were landing ground forces. The defense grid was completely gone. In another 6 hours, the creatures would break through the reinforced doors of the largest shelter complex, and 20 million Turthan would die screaming. She had stayed awake as long as possible, but exhaustion finally claimed her. Council leader, her aide was shaking her shoulder. You need to see this. Something just appeared in the outer system. Nisara forced her eyes open. The main display showed 12 unknown contacts, their energy signatures unlike anything in the Turthan database. For a terrible moment, she thought more enemies had arrived. Then the communication channel activated. Attention, Turthan Command. This is Admiral Okoye of the Earth Defense Fleet, Task Force Valkyrie. We received your distress call. Where do you need us? The voice was steady, confident, almost casual. Nisara stared at the display in confusion. Earth? She accessed the galactic database with shaking hands, searching for that designation. What she found made her blood freeze. Earth, Sol System. Classification Deathworld 3. Quarantine protocols in effect. Gravity. 1.0 standard units. Lethal to most species. Atmospheric composition. 21% oxygen, corrosive and toxic. Radiation levels extreme. Native species Class 7 predators avoid contact. The entry went on for pages, each line more horrifying than the last. The planet was covered in saltwater oceans that would dissolve Turthan biology. Its weather patterns included electrical storms that could power cities. Its native species fought and killed each other as part of their ecosystem. And something had evolved there intelligent enough to build starships. Council leader. They're waiting for a response, her aide said nervously. Nisara activated the communication channel, trying to keep her voice steady. You came from Earth? The quarantine world? There was a pause. Then the human admiral responded, and Nisara could hear what might have been amusement in her voice. Yes, is that a problem? No. Oh, we're grateful, it's just... Nisara pulled up the tactical display. Admiral, the Ravagers have over 200 bioships surrounding our world. Their ground forces are already on the surface. Our defenses are gone. I don't know what you expected to find here, but we expected to find people who needed help. Admiral Okoye interrupted. Send us the tactical data and get your civilians as deep underground as possible. This is about to get loud. The human fleet was already moving, accelerating toward the inner system at speeds that should have torn their ships apart. Nisara's sensors analyzed the vessels and returned data that made no sense. The internal temperature of the human ships averaged 22 degrees by galactic standard measurements. That was hot enough to cook Turthan flesh in minutes. The atmospheric pressure inside measured at 1 full standard unit. A Turthan transported into those ships would be crushed almost instantly, and the radiation level suggested their shielding was either failing or non-existent. They're flying in those conditions? Her aide whispered. How are they still alive? Dr. Reeves, the human xenobiologist embedded with the fleet, sent a secondary communication channel request. Nisara accepted it, desperate to understand what was happening. Council leader, I know this is overwhelming, Dr. Reeves said. Her image appeared on the screen. A being with bilateral symmetry, forward-facing eyes like a predator, and skin that looked impossibly fragile. Our environmental needs are different from yours. What seems lethal to you is normal for us. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We're very hard to kill. The Ravagers will swarm your ships, Nisara warned. They'll tear through your hulls. They adapt to every weapon we've tried. Then it's a good thing we brought weapons they've never seen, Admiral Okoye said. All ships weapons free. Execute pattern Hades. The human fleet split into 3 groups. 3 of the largest ships, the ones they called dreadnoughts, moved directly toward the Ravager swarm surrounding the planet. The smaller vessels, destroyers according to the database, scattered to flanking positions. The support carriers launched hundreds of small attack craft that moved like schools of predator fish. The Ravagers detected the new arrivals and responded immediately. Bioships peeled away from their orbital positions, forming a wall of living tissue and bone between the humans and the planet. The creatures were massive, each one the size of a city block, covered in armor that had resisted every Turthan weapon. They moved with disturbing coordination, the hive mind directing them with perfect efficiency. The first human destroyer encountered the first Ravager scout ship. Nizara watched on her sensors, expecting to see the human vessel disabled and consumed like so many Turthan ships before it. Instead, the destroyer fired something called a railgun. The weapon accelerated a solid slug of metal to a significant percentage of light speed and hit the Ravager bioship dead center. The creature exploded. Not died or disabled, exploded, shredded into fragments by the kinetic energy of something moving faster than the Ravager's biology could comprehend. What kind of weapon is that? Nisara's tactical officer breathed. Simple physics, Dr. Reeves explained, still on the communication channel. Take a piece of metal. Accelerate it fast enough. It carries more energy than most explosive weapons. We've been using kinetic weapons since before we left our planet. The Ravagers adapted quickly. More bioships swarmed the destroyer, trying to overwhelm it with numbers. The human vessel responded by launching dozens of missiles. Nisara expected some kind of energy weapon or advanced technology. What she got was simpler and more terrifying. The missiles were nuclear weapons, primitive atomic fission devices that the Turthan had abandoned thousands of years ago, as too brutal and indiscriminate. The nuclear detonations lit up the space around the destroyer, like miniature suns. Ravager bioships vanished in the explosions, their organic armor burning in nuclear fire. The ones that survived emerged damaged and disoriented, their adaptation mechanisms overwhelmed by the sheer violence of the attack. They're using nuclear weapons, Nisara said in horror, in an inhabited system, near our planet. Welcome to human warfare, Dr. Reeves said quietly. We learned to fight dirty because we had to. Our planet gave us no choice. The 3 dreadnoughts reached the main Ravager swarm. Instead of trying to outmaneuver the bioships, they flew directly into the enemy formation. Ravagers swarmed over them like parasites, tearing at armor plating and trying to breach the hulls. The human ships activated point defense weapons, thousands of rapid-fire cannons that shredded any Ravager that got too close. When the bioships adapted and started approaching from angles the point defense could not cover, the humans simply accepted the damage and kept fighting. Nisara watched in disbelief as one of the dreadnoughts, the Indomitable, lost 30% of its armor plating. Atmosphere vented from multiple breaches. The ship should have been disabled, its crew dead or dying. Instead, automated systems sealed the damaged sections. Repair crews moved through the ship in armored suits, welding hull plating while combat continued around them. The vessel kept firing, kept fighting, kept destroying Ravager bioships with mechanical efficiency. How are they surviving this? Her aide asked. Redundancy, Dr. Reeves explained. Human ships have multiple systems for every critical function. We design everything expecting it to fail, because on Earth everything eventually fails. But we learned to keep going anyway. The battle continued for 6 hours. The Ravagers adapted to railguns, so the humans switched to missiles. The Ravagers adapted to missiles, so the humans used lasers. The Ravagers adapted to lasers, so the humans went back to railguns. They cycled through weapons, never giving the hive mind time to develop permanent counters. It was warfare as brutal mathematics, calculating acceptable losses and applying overwhelming force. When the Ravagers finally broke and began retreating, they left behind the corpses of 140 bioships. The human fleet had lost 1 destroyer, torn apart when it ventured too deep into the swarm. The other 11 ships were damaged but operational, already conducting repairs even as they pursued the fleeing enemy. Admiral Okoye opened a channel to Nisara. Council leader, the orbital space is clear. We're deploying Marines to your surface to clear out the ground forces. Keep your people in the shelters. This will be over soon. Nisara looked at the tactical display, at the debris field that had been the Ravager fleet, at the human ships that had survived by being too stubborn to die. She thought about the galactic classification, Deathworld 3. She finally understood what it meant. Earth had not produced a species that could survive anywhere. It had produced a species that refused to die no matter how hard the universe tried to kill them. And those Deathworlders had come to save the Turthan because someone asked for help. Corporal Hassan checked her weapon for the 3rd time as the dropship shook through its descent. Around her, 40 Marines sat in crash harnesses, their armor sealed and weapons ready. Through the small viewport, she could see the Turthan homeworld growing larger, its surface marred by the dark masses of Ravager ground forces. This was supposed to be a rescue mission. It looked more like an invasion. 30 seconds to drop, the pilot announced over the communication channel. Enemy contact expected immediately on landing. Stay tight and watch your fields of fire. The locals are still down there. Hassan nodded to herself. That was the hard part. In space, you could fire in any direction without worrying about civilians. On the ground, with Turthan shelters scattered across the impact zone, every shot had to be calculated. Miss your target and you might breach a shelter wall. Hit it wrong and you could collapse an entire section onto the people you were trying to save. The dropship hit the ground hard, its landing struts crushing the remains of what had been a Turthan agricultural complex. The rear ramp dropped, and Hassan led her squad out into atmosphere that immediately began degrading the ship's external sensors. This planet was too cold, too low pressure, too clean for human equipment to function optimally. They would adapt. They always did. The Ravagers were waiting. They came out of the ruins like insects, four-legged creatures covered in chitinous armor, each one the size of a large vehicle. Their heads were nothing but masses of mandibles and sensory organs. They moved with disturbing coordination, the hive mind directing their assault with perfect efficiency. Hassan estimated 60 targets in the immediate area. More were coming. Weapons free, she ordered calmly. High explosive rounds only. Keep those plasma charges for hardened targets. The Marines opened fire. Their rifles used chemical propellants to launch projectiles at supersonic speeds, technology that the Turthan would consider primitive. But primitive worked. The explosive rounds tore through Ravager armor, detonating inside their bodies and shredding their internal structures. The creatures were tough, adapted to resist energy weapons and sonic attacks. They were not adapted to chunks of metal filled with explosives physically punching through their defenses. The first wave collapsed under concentrated fire. The second wave tried to flank from the eastern ruins. Hassan's tactical display marked them before they got within 200 meters. 2 Marines shifted position with their heavy weapons, shoulder-mounted launchers that fired rockets designed to penetrate bunkers. Against Ravager bioarmor, they were devastating. The creatures died in clusters, their hive mind struggling to process casualties arriving faster than it could adapt. Squad 2, push forward to the shelter entrance, Hassan ordered. We need to secure the perimeter before more arrive. They moved through the ruins in standard formation, each Marine covering sectors and maintaining sight lines. Hassan had fought in 3 major engagements during her career: the Mars Mining Rebellion, the Europa Station incident, and the cleanup operations after the Venus terraforming collapse. This felt different. Those had been human conflicts, fighting people who thought like her, reacted like her, died like her. The Ravagers were alien in every sense. They felt no fear. They did not retreat. They just kept coming until you killed enough of them that the hive mind calculated the cost was too high. A massive shape erupted from the ground ahead, a Ravager digger, easily 3 times the size of the standard drones, covered in armor thick enough to resist the explosive rounds. Its front section was mostly mouth, designed to tunnel through rock and consume everything in its path. It had probably been trying to reach the shelter from below when the humans interrupted its excavation. Plasma charges, Hassan called, already moving to cover. 4 Marines fired simultaneously. The plasma charges were magnetically contained pockets of superheated gas, designed to cut through heavy armor in ship-to-ship combat. On a planetary surface, they were wildly impractical, slow, difficult to aim, and expensive to produce. But they worked. The digger's armor melted under the concentrated plasma, exposing the vulnerable tissue beneath. Hassan finished it with a sustained burst from her rifle, explosive rounds tearing into its core until it collapsed. The shelter entrance was ahead, a reinforced door built into the side of a hill. Turthan defenders were visible behind ballistic shields, their weapons aimed at the human Marines. Hassan understood the reaction. From their perspective, a squad of armored predators had just fought through dozens of Ravagers and killed a digger in less than 10 minutes. The fact that these predators were friendly must have been difficult to process. Hold your fire, Hassan called over external speakers. We're here to help. I'm Corporal Hassan, Earth Defense Force. We need to secure this area before more Ravagers arrive. A Turthan voice responded, translated through her suit's computer. You're Deathworlders. Your kind are quarantined. Yes, and right now we're the only ones who showed up to save your lives. So how about we argue about quarantine protocols after we kill everything trying to eat you? There was a pause. Then the Turthan defenders lowered their weapons. One of them, wearing markings that suggested leadership, stepped forward. There are Ravagers in the Western Complex. They're trying to break through the secondary entrance. Show us, Hassan said. They moved through the ruins with the Turthan leader guiding them. Hassan noticed how slowly the alien moved, how carefully they navigated terrain that her Marines simply walked over. The gravity here was barely half of Earth standard. What felt like running to the Turthan was a casual jog for humans, another reminder that they came from different worlds. The Western Complex was worse than the initial landing zone. Ravagers had torn open several buildings, probably searching for alternate routes to the shelters. Bodies littered the ground, Turthan civilians who had not made it to safety in time. Hassan felt the familiar cold anger that came with seeing casualties you were too late to prevent. They would save who they could. They would kill everything that had caused this. That was the job. The secondary entrance was under siege. Dozens of Ravagers were tearing at the reinforced door, their mandibles grinding against metal. Inside, Hassan's sensors detected thermal signatures. Civilians pressed against the barrier, probably hearing the creatures trying to break through. They had minutes at best. Grenades first, Hassan ordered. Then advance with suppressing fire. Don't let them regroup. The Marines threw grenades in a coordinated pattern, small spheres that bounced among the Ravager mass before detonating. The explosions shredded the closest creatures and disoriented the rest. The Marines followed immediately, pushing into the confused mass with overwhelming firepower. At close range, their weapons were brutally effective. Ravagers died faster than the hive mind could direct reinforcements. Hassan reached the door and signaled her technical specialist. Get this open. I want these people evacuated now. The specialist worked quickly, bypassing the Turthan security systems. The door opened to reveal hundreds of civilians packed into a shelter designed for half that number. They were terrified, their large eyes reflecting the emergency lighting. When they saw the armored humans, many recoiled. Hassan did not blame them. In their armor, Marines looked like something from a nightmare. Towering predators covered in weapons and stained with the ichor of the creatures they had just killed. It's okay, Hassan said, trying to make her voice gentle through the external speakers. We're evacuating you to a safer location. The ships in orbit will provide transport. You're going to be safe. An elderly Turthan stepped forward, their crystalline body fractured from stress. You came. The message said someone would come, but we stopped believing. Why did you come? Hassan thought about all the complicated political and strategic reasons that Earth Command might give. She thought about the debates that had probably happened before the fleet deployed. Then she gave the simplest answer, the one that mattered. Because you asked for help. The evacuation took 6 hours. Marines secured perimeters while dropships ferried civilians to orbit. The Ravagers kept attacking, kept trying to reach the shelters, but every assault ran into human defenses. The Marines fought with calculated efficiency, conserving ammunition and rotating positions to cover for reloads. They were trained to fight in hostile environments with limited supplies. This was just another day at work. Captain Wei watched from the Indomitable, coordinating the ground operation while managing repairs to her ship. The dreadnought had taken heavy damage during the orbital battle. 3 entire sections were exposed to vacuum. 47 crew members were dead. But the ship was still operational, still fighting. Engineers worked around the clock, welding hull plating and rerouting systems. In any other fleet, the Indomitable would have been considered a total loss. In the Earth Defense Force, it was just damaged. Captain, we're detecting a Ravager capital ship approaching from the outer system, her tactical officer reported. Mass suggests it's their command vessel. The Hive intelligence itself, Wei studied the data. The Ravagers were making one final attempt, throwing their central coordination at the problem. If they destroyed it, the remaining drones would lose cohesion. If it reached the planet, every ground force would suddenly become coordinated and efficient again. The choice was obvious. All ships target the capital vessel. Hassan, you have 2 hours to complete evacuation. After that, we're engaging and it's going to get hot down there. Understood, Hassan responded. We'll be ready. The human fleet moved to intercept. 12 damaged ships against one massive biostructure that served as mobile hive mind. The Ravagers had numbers and adaptation. The humans had stubbornness and firepower. It was going to be close. Dr. Reeves stood in what remained of the Turthan council chambers, trying not to think about how the gravity felt wrong. Half-Earth normal meant every step wanted to launch her into the air. She had to consciously control her movements to avoid looking like she was bouncing across the room. Around her, Turthan workers were clearing debris and trying to restore basic functions to the government complex. They moved carefully around the human doctor, giving her space like she might suddenly attack. She understood the fear. The battle had been over for 7 days. The Ravager capital ship was destroyed, its remains forming a new debris field in the outer system. The surviving drones had gone dormant without the hive mind to direct them, making cleanup relatively simple. The human fleet had lost one destroyer during the fighting, the same vessel that had been damaged in the initial engagement finally succumbing to concentrated fire. 847 personnel were dead. The Turthan losses numbered in the millions, but extinction had been prevented. Nisara entered the chamber moving slowly, exhaustion evident in every gesture. She had not stopped working since. The humans arrived, coordinating evacuations and managing the crisis. Now she had to figure out how to govern a species that had seen its population reduced by 18% in less than a month. Council leader, Dr. Reeves said, giving a respectful nod. Thank you for meeting with me. Doctor, I wanted to thank you personally. Your people saved us. We did what anyone should have done. Nisara made a gesture that the translation software interpreted as bitter amusement. Anyone should have, yes. But only Earth did. They sat at a table that was too low for Reeves and too high for Nisara, both of them adapting to furniture designed for neither species. An aide brought refreshments, crystalline nutrients for Nisara and water for Reeves. The simple act of drinking from containers designed for different biologies felt symbolic somehow. I've been studying your planet, Nisara said, trying to understand. The database calls Earth a Class 12 Deathworld, the highest rating. I thought it was an exaggeration. It's not, Reeves said quietly. Earth is actively hostile to life. Our atmosphere is toxic to most species. The oxygen content would corrode their tissues. Our gravity would crush them. Our weather patterns produce storms that could destroy cities. We have tectonic plates that shift and cause earthquakes, volcanoes that can block out the sun, ocean currents that could capsize ships. And that's before you consider the native life. Your planet has predators. Everything on Earth is a predator or prey, usually both. We evolved alongside creatures that could kill us in seconds. Lions, bears, crocodiles, sharks, snakes with venom that stops your heart, insects that carry diseases, bacteria that consume flesh, viruses that jump between species. Our entire ecosystem is built on things killing and eating each other. Nisara was silent for a long moment. How did you survive? Reeves smiled. By becoming the best predator. Humans are not the strongest species on Earth. We're not the fastest, we can't fly, we don't have claws or armor or venom. What we have is endurance and intelligence. We learned to make tools. We learned to work together. We learned to adapt faster than anything trying to kill us. And we learned to fight. The violence I saw in the battle is what happens when you evolve on a planet where everything wants you dead. We developed warfare because we had to. Tribes competing for resources. Nations fighting over territory. We've had countless wars throughout our history. Tens of millions died in conflicts before we even left our planet. It made us very, very good at killing things. And yet you came to help us. Because being good at violence doesn't mean we like it. Humans are complicated. We can be incredibly brutal and incredibly compassionate, often at the same time. We developed ethics and philosophy and art alongside our weapons. We learned to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. It's part of who we are. Nisara accessed a datapad displaying information. I've been reading about Earth history, your climate collapse wars, the Mars rebellion, the Venus incident. Your species has been in almost constant conflict for your entire spacefaring history. Yes, Reeves admitted. We fight among ourselves frequently. Humans have a hard time agreeing on anything. But we also have a rule. When someone outside threatens any human group, we unite. It's tribal instinct, probably. An attack on one is an attack on all. And you extended that protection to us? Admiral Okoye did. She lost her family when no one came to help during the climate wars. She wasn't going to let that happen to another species. The rest of us followed because she was right. A communication alert interrupted them. One of Admiral Okoye's officers was requesting a meeting. Apparently, the Galactic Council had finally responded to the Turthan crisis 3 weeks after it ended. They wanted to discuss the human intervention. The conversation took place over quantum communication, multiple species joining the channel from across known space. Reeves watched as Admiral Okoye faced down representatives from a dozen civilizations, none of whom had sent help when the Turthan called for it. The humans violated quarantine protocols, one representative stated. Earth is classified as a dangerous world. Its inhabitants are not approved for general contact. The Turthan were dying. Okoye responded, her voice level. Your protocols didn't seem very important compared to genocide. You deployed military forces in a sovereign system without authorization. We deployed military forces in response to a distress call that you all ignored. If sovereignty is your concern, perhaps you should have protected it when the Ravagers invaded. Your tactics were unnecessarily brutal. The use of nuclear weapons saved millions of lives. I noticed none of you complaining volunteered your own forces. It's easy to criticize when you're safe and comfortable. Try fighting for your survival sometime. See how elegant your tactics are then. The representatives shifted uncomfortably. Finally, one of them spoke with what might have been respect. Admiral, your intervention was successful. The Ravagers have transmitted warnings throughout their swarm network about humans. They're avoiding human-protected space. This is unprecedented. Good. Maybe that will save some other species from what the Turthan went through. The Council would like to extend an invitation to Earth. We've been unaware of your capabilities. Your species would be valuable as a protector member state. You want us to be your military, Okoye said bluntly. We want to establish formal relations. Your people have proven themselves capable defenders. There are many species in vulnerable positions who would benefit from human protection. Okoye was quiet for a moment. I'll forward the invitation to Earth Command. But understand something. If we accept, we do this our way. We don't abandon people who call for help. We don't debate while civilizations burn. And we don't apologize for being effective at protecting those who can't protect themselves. Those terms are acceptable. After the communication ended, Nisara turned to Dr. Reeves. Your admiral is very direct. She's from Lagos. They don't waste words in Lagos. What will Earth decide? Reeves considered the question. Honestly, I think we'll accept. Humans have always been explorers and protectors. It's in our nature. We spent thousands of years thinking we were alone in the universe. Now we know we're not. We know there are species out there who need help. We know there are threats that need to be fought. We're not going to ignore that. Even though it means more fighting, more casualties. Especially because of that. Humans understand the cost of violence. We've paid it over and over throughout our history. But we also understand the cost of inaction, of watching people die when you could have helped. Admiral Okoye carries that cost every day. So do a lot of us. Nisara looked at the human doctor, trying to reconcile the gentle scientist with the brutal Marines she had watched fight through Ravager forces. I don't understand your species. Most days neither do we, Reeves said with a smile. But that's what makes us human. We're contradictory, violent and peaceful, selfish and selfless. We're capable of terrible things and beautiful things, often in the same day. Earth made us hard because it had to. But it also made us empathetic because we all understand suffering. We've all felt it. And now you want to protect the galaxy? We want to make sure that when someone sends a distress call into the dark, someone answers. Because we remember what it's like when no one does. Outside, human engineers were working with Turthan technicians to repair the planetary defense grid. The two species moved carefully around each other, adapting to different environmental needs and communication styles. It was awkward and inefficient, but it was happening. They were learning. And across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, species were updating their databases. Earth was no longer just Deathworld 3, the quarantine planet. It was something else now. A dangerous ally, a fierce protector. The Deathworlders who came when you called. The species who answered. 6 months had passed since Task Force Valkyrie returned to Earth orbit. The ships came back damaged but triumphant, carrying stories that spread through human space faster than official reports. The recordings of the battle circulated on every station and colony. People watched humans fight against impossible odds and win. They watched Admiral Okoye face down the Galactic Council and refuse to apologize for saving lives. Within weeks, recruitment for the Earth Defense Force increased by 40%. Everyone wanted to be part of the fleet that answered distress calls. The political process moved slower than the public enthusiasm. Earth Command debated the Council's invitation for 2 months, consulting with every government and colony administration in human space. Some argued against joining, saying that Earth should focus on its own expansion rather than fighting alien wars. Others pointed out that the galaxy now knew humans existed, and isolationism was no longer an option. Better to engage on their own terms than wait for someone else to define humanity's role. Admiral Okoye attended every debate, though she rarely spoke. When she did, her words carried weight. We went to Turth in space because it was the right thing to do. That hasn't changed. The galaxy is full of species like the Turthan, peaceful, vulnerable, unable to defend themselves against predators. We can help them. We should help them. Not because it benefits us, but because we're capable and they're not. That's reason enough. The vote was close but decisive. Earth would join the Galactic Council as a protector member state. The term was carefully chosen. Not military power, not enforcers, protectors. Humanity would defend species that could not defend themselves, respond to threats that others could not handle, and do it without apology. The formal ceremony took place on Council Station, a massive structure orbiting a neutron star in neutral space. Every member species sent representatives. Nisara attended as the Turthan ambassador, her crystalline form modified with environmental gear to survive the standard atmosphere the station maintained. She watched as Admiral Okoye walked through corridors designed for smaller, frailer species. Her footsteps heavy in the gravity that was comfortable for most but barely noticeable to humans. The council chamber was designed to accommodate hundreds of species, each in their own environmental zone. Humans stood in a section with enhanced gravity and oxygen-rich atmosphere, isolated from those who would find such conditions lethal. Okoye wore her full-dress uniform, every medal and commendation earned through decades of service. She looked exactly like what she was, a warrior who had seen too much death and refused to see more. The council leader, a species whose name translated roughly as the diplomatic ensemble, spoke first. Their translation software rendered their harmonic language into words. We welcome Earth to the Galactic Council. Your actions at Turthan have demonstrated capabilities we did not know existed. Your species brings unique strengths to our community. We bring what we have, Okoye responded. Nothing more, nothing less. The Council requests clarification on human military doctrine. Your tactics at Turthan were unlike any we have encountered. We wish to understand your approach to conflict. Okoye smiled without humor. Our approach is simple. We fight to win. We use whatever weapons and tactics are effective. We accept casualties as necessary but not acceptable. We don't stop until the threat is neutralized. And we protect civilians above all else. That's the doctrine. Overwhelming force applied with precision, guided by the principle that innocent lives matter more than elegant tactics. Some species find such brutality disturbing. Some species watch the Turthan die without helping. I'm not concerned about disturbing them. There was silence in the chamber. Then the diplomatic ensemble made a gesture that suggested acceptance. Earth is recognized as a protector member state. You will have access to threat intelligence and distress call networks. How you choose to respond is at your discretion, with the understanding that excessive force may result in council review. We'll respond the same way we did at Turthan, fast, hard, and effectively. If the council has a problem with that, they can send their own fleets next time. The ceremony continued with formal agreements and diplomatic protocols. Nisara watched it all, remembering the desperate days when her people thought they would die alone. Now Earth was formally committed to ensuring that never happened to another species. It felt like justice, though she suspected Admiral Okoye would call it something simpler: responsibility. After the ceremony, Nisara found Okoye in one of the observation lounges, looking out at the neutron star's distorted light. The Admiral held a drink that would be toxic to most species, something called whiskey that humans consumed despite its mild poisonous properties. "Congratulations on the new assignment," Nisara said. "Thank you, though I suspect the Council will regret this decision when they see how humans actually operate. They need you. We all do. The galaxy is more dangerous than most species want to admit." Okoye nodded slowly. "I've seen the intelligence reports. The Ravagers are not the only threat out there. There are predator species throughout the frontier. Pirates, slavers, rogue AI systems, species too advanced or too hostile for the Council to engage. Someone has to deal with them. And humans will. Someone has to. Might as well be us. We're already adapted to dealing with things that want to kill us." They stood in silence for a while, watching the impossible light. Finally, Nisara spoke again. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Reeves told me. About Earth making humans hard. About survival requiring brutality. Do you think that's true?" "Partially," Okoye said. "Earth taught us to fight, but it also taught us why to fight. Every human knows what it's like to struggle, to be afraid, to need help and not know if it will come. That empathy is just as important as the violence. Maybe more important, the other species fear you. Good. Fear is useful. It means they'll think twice before threatening the people we protect. But I hope eventually they'll see past the fear, see that humans can be trusted, that we fight for the right reasons. They'll see it," Nisara said with certainty. "We did." Over the following months, humanity's presence in the galaxy became increasingly visible. Defense pacts were established with 7 vulnerable species. Human ships patrolled trade routes, their presence deterring pirate attacks. When distress calls came in, human fleets responded with the same speed and overwhelming force they had shown at Turthan. They lost ships, they lost personnel, but they always came when called. Captain Wei commanded the newly formed Second Fleet, 3 dreadnoughts and supporting vessels dedicated to rapid response. She was conducting patrol exercises near a developing colony when the distress call arrived. A species called the Varani were under attack by raiders, their orbital stations being systematically looted. The raiders had chosen their target carefully. The Varani were pacifists, philosophers who had never developed military technology. Easy prey. Wei's fleet jumped into the system within hours. The raiders detected them immediately and broadcast warnings, threatening to destroy the stations if the humans interfered. Wei responded by launching fighters and targeting the raider ships with railguns. The raiders realized too late that humans did not negotiate with hostage-takers. They fought desperately, but were outmatched by ships designed to survive in the chaotic environment of Sol System. Within 3 hours, the raid was over. The Varani were safe. Similar stories repeated across the frontier. A mining colony saved from automated weapons. A refugee convoy protected from slavers. A research station evacuated before a stellar flare. Every time, humans responded with efficiency and determination. The galaxy started to understand what Admiral Okoye had promised. When someone called for help, Earth answered. Corporal Hassan took a new assignment training mixed species defense forces. She stood in a facility on Council Station, watching recruits from a dozen worlds try to master human combat techniques. Most of them could barely lift human weapons. The gravity was too much. The recoil was too strong, but they tried anyway, inspired by stories of humans fighting impossible battles and winning. "Humans make it look easy," one recruit complained during a break. "It's not easy," Hassan corrected. "It never is. We're just very practiced at doing difficult things. Earth taught us that nothing worth doing is easy, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing anyway." She thought about the battles she had fought, the Marines she had lost, the civilians she had saved. The cost was high, but the alternative was letting people die when you could have helped. That was a cost Hassan refused to pay. Dr. Reeves established the Xenocultural Institute, a research center dedicated to understanding the diverse species of the galaxy. She worked with Turthan scientists, Varani philosophers, and representatives from dozens of worlds. They studied each other's histories, shared knowledge, and built bridges across the vast differences that separated them. It was slow work, complicated by environmental needs and communication barriers, but it was happening. One evening, Reeves sat in her office reviewing the latest data. Earth had been in the galactic community for barely a year, and already humanity was reshaping it. Not through conquest or domination, but through the simple act of helping. The galaxy had operated for thousands of years on principles of cautious self-interest, each species looking after its own. Humans arrived and rejected that entirely. They fought for strangers. They risked their lives for people they had never met. It was changing how other species thought about cooperation and community. Admiral Okoye retired after finalizing the Defense Pact frameworks. She had served for 50 years, seen more combat than most officers experienced in multiple lifetimes. Now she wrote, documenting humanity's first contact with the galaxy for future generations. Her memoirs were brutally honest about the costs of protection, the weight of command decisions, and the necessity of violence in an often violent universe. In the final chapter, she wrote, "We came from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived by becoming hard, by learning to fight, by refusing to give up no matter the odds. Some species call us Deathworlders as an insult, implying we're too brutal for civilized company. I accept that label. We are Deathworlders. We survived death itself, and now we use that strength to protect those who can't protect themselves. If that makes us uncivilized, then civilization can go to hell. We'll be busy answering distress calls." The book became required reading at every Earth Defense Force academy. Recruits memorized her words, carried them into battle, lived them in every engagement. The message was simple. Humans fight because someone has to, and because they can, and because it's right. Years would pass. More species would join the protection agreements. More threats would emerge from the dark spaces between stars. More humans would die protecting aliens they had never met. But the foundation was set. Earth had taken its place in the galaxy not as conquerors or traders or explorers, but as guardians. Nisara lived long enough to see it all. She watched human fleets spread across the frontier. She watched species that once feared Earth come to trust it. She watched the galaxy slowly understand what the Turthan had learned in their darkest hour. When you send a desperate call into the void, sometimes the answer comes from the most terrifying place imaginable. And sometimes those terrifying Deathworlders are exactly who you need. On the anniversary of the Turthan rescue, monuments were built on dozens of worlds. They showed humans and aliens standing together, different but united. The inscriptions varied by species and language, but they all said the same thing in different ways. The Turthan version translated simply, "They came when we called. They fought when we couldn't. They stayed when others left. Remember the Deathworlders who became our protectors." Humanity had found its purpose among the stars. Not conquest, not expansion, protection, because someone had to answer the calls. And humans had learned long ago that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant making sure others survived too. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but now when the desperate sent their messages into the dark, they knew something would answer. Something hard and unyielding and impossibly brave. Something from the third planet of a yellow star, from Deathworld 3 from Earth. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were here to help.